Hi folks, Dr. Rybakova here. Welcome to your first flipped lesson. In this lesson, we'll talk about how to set up your team folder on Google Drive, as well as how to do certain types of APA citations and formatting. We won't get to everything in this flipped lesson, but you'll kind of get an idea of what your citations should look like. Okay, to start off, we have Google Drive up. Just so that you can see, right here you have where you would get to Google Drive. You do need a Gmail for Google Drive. What you would do is click on that. I'm turning it off. Click on the Google app, click on Drive, and it'll pull up. You should be able to access the CS115 business through both the link that is on the syllabus and on Moodle, as well as through your Google Apps. It should be in the Shared with Me folder. Keep in mind that the reason why it's called CS115 Business is not because you are all business majors, but rather it's for me, it's actually more so for me than for you. It's for me to be able to differentiate between the two sections I'm teaching, one for education majors and the other one where we're writing a business plan. Is a little bit of a different course. Okay, so you'll see that we have opened up a CS115. You won't see the Thomas College, those are my folders. You won't see that, but you will see this on your end. What you'll do is you'll click on Team Folders. Right now you'll see that there is nothing there. What you want to do is you want to click on New Folder, and then you write whatever you want in that folder. You can call it Team 1 and go by numbers. You can decide Team Awesome. As long as I know who you guys are in that group, I don't mind what you call it. Keep it school appropriate, please. But you'll see that that gets populated really fast. Now, when you do create a folder, it's going to ask you if you want it to be shared. You always want to make sure that you have it shared. So what you do is you click on that little people icon right there. You click on Get Shareable Link. You want to make sure it's turned on. And then you want to make sure, typically what it'll say at first is anyone with the link can edit, can view. You want to change it to anyone with the link can edit. So then you'll just copy and paste that and send it to me via email so that I for sure have access to your team folder. The reason why that's important is, well, that's how I'm going to check in on your work. And you also want to be able to let me access your team folders so that I can give you feedback as you're going through your business plan. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to look into some APA citation formatting. The go-to resource for this is Purdue Online Writing Lab. If you just type in OWL English at Purdue on Google, that it should be the first link that you get to. So there's a lot of words and a lot of stuff going on. You should get familiar with how to format using APA with the general formatting. We're not going to cover that today, but we will cover that eventually. Okay, this is your go-to site for formatting. What we're going to cover today is in-text citations, the basics, and we're going to talk about electronic sources, both peer-reviewed and non-peer-reviewed. Let's start with the non-peer-reviewed. So I'm going to pull up, oops, that's the wrong thing. I'm going to pull up the Word document right here, and as you can see, there are penguins here. So if I were to create a research paper on penguins and I wanted to cite something, specifically with the page number. So if you see, for example, right here, I'm saying the Galapagos penguin is the rarest species of penguin and is the only one found north of the equator in the wild. So I would want to make sure that I have a citation. You can also format it with, according to Higgins 2013, the Galapagos penguin is the rarest species of penguin and is the only one found north of the equator in the wild. So notice that there are quotation marks here. Okay, that signifies that I've copied and pasted this sentence from the source. Okay, you can write it in certain ways. You can just write the sentence and add the citation. So in this case, it would be Higgins, which is the last name of the author, 2013. And then in this version, according to Higgins, 2013, you would write the date. The date and the author always go together, regardless of where it is in the sentence. Keep that in mind. A lot of people put the date after the sentence. That's actually incorrect APA citation. These two citations are also missing something. They're missing the page number. So oftentimes when we Google something, so for example, for this quote, I just Googled cool penguin facts into Google. I clicked on the first website I got, which we'll get to the citation in a little bit. And then I copied and pasted the sentence, which was pretty cool. Typically, when you do research through, say, a book, you'll have a page number where you found that information. Online, you don't have page numbers typically when you're looking at online articles. In that case, you would want to cite the paragraph number. In this case, the paragraph number is 3. So that means that if I wanted to find this information on the source myself, I would follow the URL here, and we'll get to this in a second. You'll click on the URL and you'll go to paragraph 3 and you'll find this sentence. So keep that in mind as you focus on creating citations yourself. Now let's get to the citation itself. The citation APA style is formatted like this. It's pretty straightforward. It's the last name, comma, and then the first initial, the date, followed by a period, the title without capitalizations, and then retrieved from whatever the URL is. That changes depending on what kind of source it is. So if it's a peer-reviewed source, which we'll get to in a little bit, it's formatted a little differently. So APA has a couple of quirks with it. First of all, compared to MLA citations, the first name is not spelled out. Keep that in mind. There are very, very specific rules, and you do want to stay consistent as you go through this. Oftentimes when you're, say, putting forward your research for a business plan in this case, people will see inadequate sources or incorrectly cited sources as a lack of professionalism. So that's why you want to make sure that you're doing it really well and you're doing it correctly. One of the biggest mistakes is capitalizing the titles. APA is weird and it requires that the titles are not capitalized. This is sometimes annoying because typically all titles are capitalized. So you'd want to write down the title without capitalizing. If you have any proper nouns though, you would capitalize them. So if there were where in the world you can see Russian penguins, Russian would be capitalized in that case. So proper nouns always get capitalized regardless. And then you write retrieve from and then the URL. Okay, so sometimes when we go and look for, say, penguin data, we will find that the source is a community or an organization and doesn't have a specific author. If that's the case, you cite the organization. So if I were to cite SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment, I would do the same thing. Again, this is missing the paragraph number. I don't remember. I think it was 5. But for the sake of this flip lesson, we'll just say that it's paragraph 5. It's either 5 or 6. We have to make sure that we add the paragraph number. Now, that changes if you paraphrase the quote instead of copying and pasting. I suggest you do this unless the information is very, very, very important in the way that it's said, or if you find the quote to be very relevant and well written enough to copy and paste. You don't want to copy and paste too many block quotes. Those are over 40 words. And if you're not sure how to format that, you can ask me. You don't want to, you want most of your work to be your own. So you don't want to overuse quotes, but you also want to make sure that you're using them correctly. So in this case, if we are quoting this, I would synthesize this information afterwards, which means that penguins swallow rocks on purpose, but scientists are still not sure why. And then when I cite it, I would cite the organization first since there's no author. 2016, Diet and Eating Habits. Notice that that's not capitalized, and then retrieve from the URL. Okay, those are online sources that aren't peer-reviewed. And keep in mind there are a couple, the one glaring mistake in these citations is that they don't have it hanging indents, which we'll get to in a little bit. That's the specific formatting and what it looks like. And we'll get to what those look like once we get down to the second page of these citations. So really what I want you to take away here is that, first of all, APA citations written consistently and correctly are important on the job market and when you're putting forward a professional document. I want you to take away that there are nuances such as using only the first name initial, not capitalizing the title, using the specific URL, and when you're looking at in-text citations, using the paragraph number rather than the page number if it doesn't exist. I want those to be really the things that you take away from this. Furthermore, I also think that it's important to know when it's appropriate to use quotes versus when you need to paraphrase. In these cases, honestly, you'd be better off paraphrasing rather than using the quote specifically, just because you could probably say this paraphrased pretty easily and it won't lose its meaning or its strength or power in terms of the sentence. Okay, so that is how you cite an online source. And online sources, a lot of people will tell you that online sources are probably not the best to cite because they're unreliable. Really, the time that you really want to avoid citing is when you don't have some form of information to build an APA citation. So if you go on a website and there's no clear organization and there's no clear date, that's probably an unreliable source. If there's an author but no date, also maybe try and find something a little bit more reliable. If there's no information at all or no title, that's definitely not a reliable source. There are a lot of reliable sources. You just have to be smart about what you choose and make sure that what you're choosing has an author, has a date, etc., etc. So let's move on to peer-reviewed work. So peer-reviewed work is, and I'm going to move over to Thomas College's library service, which you should try out and know how to use. So peer-reviewed essentially means that a scholar writes an article or a manuscript or a text. They send it to a journal venue of some kind, and on that journal there is a sitting editorial board and peer reviewers. Those are people who have stake in the field and who can speak to whether or not their manuscript adds to the scholarship in that field. So in terms of education, for example, if I wanted to write a manuscript about proficiency-based learning, I would submit it to a specific journal, and if those peer reviewers don't think that what I'm saying really is well researched or well grounded, they can deny me. And if it's published, that means that it's properly vetted. So really, peer-reviewed articles are very, very reliable sources. There are downsides. Typically, research like that, sometimes it's a little dry, they are a little longer, but there is a huge upside in that it's very, very strong research, and it makes you look like you know what you're talking about, because when you're reading that kind of research, those are the scholars and experts in the field talking about what they know, and they've been properly vetted. So how to find them? I usually use Academic Search Complete. I like JSTOR as well. You can use pretty much anything on these. Academic Search Complete is one of the more popular ones, and it's it's a very big search engine. It kind of acts like Google, but a Google Scholar where it looks for peer-reviewed work. So I've typed in penguins and climate change, and this is what I've received in this search. So a couple things that I did. Oftentimes when you look, the first thing you want to look at is search results. If it's over 1,000, that means that your search is pretty large and that it's going to take a while to sift through all of those results, and you might not get exactly what you want. One of the things that I like to do is add limiters, and I've already done that here. It's pretty easy to do. You go to Limit To, you click on Scholarly Peer-Reviewed Journals, okay, and you adjust the publication date. One of the things that you want to really make sure you have is up-to-date publications. I would say that's within 10 years of where we're at. So 2006 to 2016 is a pretty good starting place. You can change it to 2000 to 2016, but once you get further back in history, typically those change in relevance and sometimes are no longer relevant. So I've added those limiters, and then I've clicked on climate change increases reproductive failure. So I will go over to that PDF, and you can see that it's a fairly long, specific research study about what causes this reproductive failure. Now notice that when you go and look for peer-reviewed articles, oftentimes, and journals, more and more journals have started doing this, they add the citation for you. Now I caution you to use these because oftentimes they're incorrectly cited. So in this case, we're missing a couple of things. So what I've done is I haven't done that. Let's go back and copy and paste it. Okay, so let's copy and paste the citation. We'll add it. Okay, and we'll take a look at this. So one of the things that you want to do right away is go back to the OWL and click on electronic sources, and you'll see that there are lots of options in terms of formatting. What you want is an online scholarly journal article or peer-reviewed article with a DOI assigned. That's essentially a stable URL. There's sometimes no DOI, so there's an option for that too. But in this case, we do have one, so we're going to follow that formatting. So in this case, it looks like they're pretty good. The one thing they're missing are commas here, and then an ampersand in between the author names. They're missing periods. And then, as you can see, the title is capitalized. So we'll go through, and again, the proper nouns are kept capitalized. In this case, this is italicized, and I've done a lot of these, so I know how to do it by heart. And you can see this is the page number, and you can see that it has a starting page number, but it doesn't have an ending page number. So we want to go back and make sure we have an ending page number. This is kind of a funky venue, and it has a weird page number. Typically they're just normal page numbers. We'll add that and match. So in this case, this is a correctly cited APA citation. When we first copied and pasted it, it was not correct. Okay, so remember how when we were talking about these citations, we talked about how the formatting was not correct? Let's talk about the formatting now. So oftentimes you see references, citations indented. So you'll have the starting author here and then an indent these following lines. Oftentimes what people do is they click indent and then they play with the formatting until they figure out how to indent it correctly. That's not the easiest way to do it. It's possible to do it that way, but I will show you a much easier way. All you do is highlight your citations, you right click on paragraph, and then where it says special, you're going to select hanging. that means that you have a hanging indent. As you can see, it's changed all of our citations to the correct hanging indent, and that's what it looks like. So every reference, starting with the second line, everything is indented afterwards. And you can see, and I just copied a bunch of references off of my dissertation here to give you an example. As you can see, this says all in alphabetical order, which is what you want to make sure that you have. Creating alphabetical order is pretty easy. You just click on this and click on paragraph. Just don't do that with text because it'll alphabetize everything. Just make sure you highlight just the references to do that. So if you have any questions about citations, feel free to email me. I know it's kind of tricky and sometimes these rules are a little bit strange, but do try to use the OWL at Purdue and try your hand at finding peer-reviewed research because it will pay off. You will end up doing it at some point in your academic career, and it's better to just kind of play with it now and not be afraid to make mistakes than really just not know how to do it later on when you really need to.